Well, hello, Crossbridge. It's been a while since I've been able to be with you, and I'm very excited to be with you this weekend. I want to bring you greetings from all the other Nazarenes across the 30 counties of northwestern Illinois. Every weekend when we gather, there are Nazarenes gathering in large churches and small churches. Some Nazarenes gathering in a bar in Henry, Illinois. Some are gathering in people's homes. Others are gathering even right now tonight for a Juneteenth celebration in the Southside neighborhood of Peoria, and they are meeting as part of the Southside Community Center there, which is an outreach of Pekin First Church. And we are just thrilled at what God's people across our district are doing in the name of Jesus. I'm here to talk to you tonight about what God's up to in our lives. Not just Crossbridge, not just my life, but your life. I just got back from a week-long vacation, and it was not everything it was cracked up to be. It was good. I'm thankful for it. But I had in my mind a vision of this, like I do with every time I get away on a vacation. I have this vision in mind of like this ultimate state of well-being that I'm going to achieve. And we were going to the beach on the west coast of Florida, and we had high hopes. And so we got there, and the first day on the beach, where we kind of all three of us, my wife, my oldest daughter, and I were able to go, and we started coughing. And we noticed the second day that other people were coughing, and there were a few dead fish on the beach. And then by the third day, there were hundreds of dead fish on the beach, and it was hard to breathe. And the red tide was coming in. I guess there's an algae bloom that happens periodically, and that would just so happen that it decided that our vacation was the time to hit. Well, needless to say, the west coast of Florida was not allowing me to achieve the ultimate state of well-being. I was not finding it to be paradise. So we checked out of that hotel, and we got in our rental car and drove across the state to the East Coast. And we thought, this is going to be better. And it was better. The water was bluer. It was cooler. It was really, really nice. But then we started itching that night. And Sherry and Libby especially, they react really violently to bug bites. I thought maybe I didn't get bit, but then the next day I noticed, I got them too. And we're still itching from those bug bites. We found out, we thought we had maybe bed bugs in the hotel room because, we're not big spenders. And we wondered what in the world's going on. We didn't see a bunch of bugs on the beach. We saw some, but not enough to do what these bugs had done to us. And so we saw a sign then in the hotel lobby that said, "No see-ums." And it said, these bugs get on you. You don't know they're there. You can't really see them. I guess that's how they got that brilliant name. No see-ums. And you don't feel the bite until later, and then the itching starts a day or two later. And so the East Coast turned out to be a little better than the West Coast, but it escaped me that I never got to that ultimate state of well-being. In fact, if I was to be realistic, I don't think any vacation I've ever been on was quite what it was cracked up to be. I don't think I've ever had that moment on a vacation where everything was right and I was at perfect peace and I felt supremely blessed. Now, maybe you take better vacations than I do, and I should take some advice from you. But this vacation certainly didn't include that. Isn't that kind of what we're all after in this life? It seems like we're all after at least maybe some eternal blessedness, and that's why we live our life the way we do in this world. Sometimes maybe we're after a payoff in this world. I was taught at a young age that if you will delay gratification now, you can have more gratification later. That was usually when my mom was trying to get me to eat my vegetables or do my homework, that if you work first, you can play later. I always thought it was a better idea to play now, because you don't know what later is going to bring. But that's something I had to learn along the way. But we all would opt for a state of greater blessedness, of greater well-being, versus a state of less blessedness and less well-being. In fact, most of the great religious systems are built around some promise of a better future, of a state of well-being that you couldn't get to on your own. If you think about Islam, there are people that do all kinds of things in the name of Islam and who talk about having been promised 70 virgins in paradise. There are those who follow Buddhism And they follow the Buddha, whose biography is that he left his wife and newborn child in order to pursue this state of utter detachment that would come to be known as nirvana. And that's kind of the ultimate state of blessedness in that belief system. In Judaism, it's shalom, or peace. A place where we're at complete peace with God and with each other and with our surroundings, and it's an ultimate state of well-being, a place of thriving. And then, what does Jesus have to say about this pursuit? About this business of running after this ultimate state of well-being? You know, some people in our world have completely given up on anything ever really being that much greater than what it is, and so they settle for escapes. They settle for amusements. They settle for indulgences because they don't think life's really ever going to get any better, and they don't think anybody's promises are really ever going to pay off. So they just get what they can for themselves today. And they don't have a whole lot of hope beyond whatever little bit of payoff they can get in the here and now. And that's a rough way to live, but there are an awful lot of people who are stuck there. People who aren't down and out necessarily. They're not bad people, but they feel stuck and without hope that there really is something worth pursuing and sacrificing for. What does Jesus have to say about this pursuit? Matthew chapter 5 in verse 1. I want to take you there. And I think we're going to have the passage on the screen. And let me just get there in my Bible. In Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 1, Jesus is getting ready to share with his disciples. And in verse 1 it says, "Now when he saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them, saying." So you've got a picture here of Jesus who walks away from the crowds up on the mountainside. He sits down, his disciples come up right close to him, and then everybody else in the crowds, we assume, is kind of hanging on and looking on. They're hanging out and listening to what Jesus has to say to his disciples. He's really teaching his disciples, but he knows the crowds are there, and they're all getting in on what he's saying. He says, he begins to teach them in verse 3, blessed. So he doesn't say nirvana is, or paradise is, or shalom is even. He says blessed. This ultimate state of well-being. You are experiencing the ultimate state of well-being when you are poor in spirit. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The poor in spirit, these are people who are not haughty in spirit. They're not superior in their spirit. They're humble. They recognize that they have a poverty of spirit, that on their own, they're only capable of so much. In fact, they're not probably going to produce paradise on their own or find paradise on their own. They are poor in spirit. So he says these people who are humble, who recognize their own poverty, are blessed in a state of ultimate well-being. He goes on in verse 4. If this seems odd to you, then hang out there for a minute, because it ought to seem odd to us, because Jesus wants it to seem odd to us. That's, I think, part of his point. In verse 4 he says, blessed, in other words, in a state of ultimate well-being, are those who mourn, whose hearts are broken, who have experienced loss, for they will be comforted. And he says that word again, blessed. Ultimate state of well-being are the meek. Now, meek is not necessarily weakness, but meekness is meekness as opposed to weakness. Meekness is strength in reserve, strength unexercised. It is strength that doesn't grab for itself. He says, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Now that almost just seems exactly the opposite of what's really true, doesn't it? Because who inherits the things of this earth? Those who go out and take them. Who inherits the earth? Those who go out and earn it. Those who go out and get what's rightfully theirs, or what's not rightfully theirs, but they're strong enough to take it. That's who inherits the earth. But Jesus here turns our expectations and our understandings completely on their head and says, blessed are the meek. In a state of ultimate well-being, thriving, blessedness are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Because when it comes right down to it, whose is the earth to give? And we may not get all the goodies in the here and now, but if we will keep our strength in reserve and in weakness, in poverty of spirit, in a maybe even through seasons of mourning, we will trust in Him in meekness. He says, we will inherit the earth. Then He says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Do you know people who hunger and thirst for other stuff? Do you ever find yourself hungering and thirsting for other stuff? There's a lot of stuff out there that we can hunger and thirst for. There's a lot of stuff that's put in front of us, a lot of TV commercials about food that cause me to hunger and thirst. There's a lot out there that I see other people enjoying that I think, I would probably enjoy that too. But He says, in essence, all these things that promise to fill you will leave you empty. But blessed, happy, in a state of ultimate well-being are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. What is righteousness? It sounds like self-righteousness, doesn't it? It sounds like thinking we're better than other people. But that's not what the word righteousness means in the Scriptures. In the Scriptures, it simply means being right with God and right with people. We are experiencing righteousness when we're in a right relationship with God and we're in a right relationship with people. How do we get there? Well, we get there by being poor in spirit, by including God in our mourning, by being meek, by hungering and thirsting for it. We have a way of, I don't know about you, but I usually don't stay hungry that long. That shocks you, doesn't it? Usually when I'm hungry, I find something to quench that hunger. When I'm thirsty, I somehow find something to quench that thirst. And if I run after all the things, all the empty promises of this world, Jesus says I'll end up empty. But if I run after righteousness, being right with Him and right with others, I'll find myself filled. I'll find myself in a place of blessedness, of ultimate well-being. Now, so far, he's confused us a little, but hang in there because it gets worse. Verse 7, he says, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. You see, in God's economy, our mercy toward others has to come first before we receive mercy from God. You thought I was going to say others, didn't you? But we have to show others mercy who don't deserve it before we can expect mercy from God from whom we don't deserve it. And he says if we are merciful with others, you know what mercy is? Mercy is when somebody extends you goodwill and you know good and well you don't deserve it. When you know good and well you've got something bad coming and somebody gives you something good instead. When have you ever received mercy and you knew it in the moment? Have you ever needed mercy and you knew you needed mercy? When you need mercy and you know you need mercy and then you receive mercy, it really does feel blessed, doesn't it? Have your parents ever let you off the hook when they knew good and well and you knew good and well you were guilty? My parents sure never did. But I imagine if they ever had, that would have been blessed. I'm going to talk to Dad about that on Father's Day tomorrow. It's going in my Father's Day card. When you need mercy, it is really sweet when you receive it. You know what's even sweeter is to be able to offer it to somebody else who doesn't deserve it, who hasn't offered it to you first. Jesus says, blessed are the merciful. See, but that's backwards a little bit in our thinking and the world's thinking, because it's better to receive mercy. That's more blessed than offering mercy, because when you offer mercy, you're letting somebody off the hook. It means you're not going to get from them what they owe you. Whether it be an emotional payoff or an apology or whatever else, you're extending mercy. They're in the wrong, they're in your debt, and you're extending mercy, which means you're not getting whatever you've got coming from them. because you've extended them mercy. And yet Jesus says that's when you're most blessed, when you're merciful. Then he says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the pure in heart. Now, pure in heart isn't about a fussy, super perfectionist need to be free from all the pollutants of the world. This isn't about somebody being cleaner than anybody else, or having OCD, or having hand sanitizer all the time for their whole body and their insides and their outsides. This is about being undivided. To be pure in heart means that you don't have competing priorities in your heart. You don't have your heart torn 10 different directions. You don't have loyalties fighting for supremacy in your heart. You're pure in heart. It means you've got a single motive in your heart. And you can kind of imagine, can't you, how blessed that would be to have one overwhelming loyalty in your whole heart, to have your whole heart poured out and tuned in and bent toward one direction and one ultimate purpose in life. That would bring blessedness, to not be pulled in a bunch of different directions. He says, blessed are the pure in heart, the undivided, the unconflicted, for they will see God. Then he says, blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the peacemakers. Not the peacekeepers. I don't want to make too much of this. Sometimes in preaching, the preacher is tempted to get a little too clever. But let me just lay this out for you and not claim some final authority of biblical scholarship for it, but just to suggest to you that it might be significant that he says peacemakers and not peacekeepers. See, we tend to think sometimes that the way the world works is that evil has substance and goodness is the absence of that evil. But that's exactly backwards. You see, it's evil that has no substance. It's evil that has no existence on its own, but it is simply a twisting or a deprivation of the good. It is the good that has positive meaning. It is the good that has substance, that's a real thing, and evil that twists it and deprives us of it. And so when he says peacemaker, I think it's significant that he's not just talking about what we normally think of when we think of peacemakers, and that is somebody who avoids conflict, somebody who avoids people being at odds with each other, because we tend to think that conflict is a thing and avoiding it is peace. But he doesn't say peacekeeper, he says peacemaker, because peace is the thing. And depriving others of it, twisting it, contorting it is the evil. So he says we can make peace. But we can't make peace. I mean, I don't know how to make peace. I got to go get it from somewhere. I don't know what the raw materials for peace are. I don't know what the recipe is. So I better go get it from somewhere. I'm going to have to find it somewhere if I'm going to do anything with it to make more of it. Now, I can make recipes. I can collect the ingredients for something and then make something in my kitchen, put all those ingredients together and make something. So maybe there are some ingredients for peace that we just need to discover and then learn how, by the leadership of the Holy Spirit, how to put those together to make peace. If I want to make a cake, I don't just go buy a cake and say, hey, I made a cake. I go buy the stuff to make a cake and then I make the cake. I've never done that. I don't know what I'm talking about. But I imagine if I was going to make a cake, that's what I would do. So if I'm going to make peace, I got to get the ingredients somewhere. What do you suppose the ingredients for peace might be? Is it possible the ingredients for peace are being poor in spirit, mourning, being meek, hungering and thirsting for righteousness, being merciful, being pure in heart? I wonder if those are the building blocks for peace. And that's how we make peace, is by nurturing these qualities, these realities in our inner world, in my inner self. We tend to think that paradise is an outward state that we'll experience when the outside is so good that it helps our insides feel really, really blessed. But that's not what Jesus is offering us here. He's offering us a way to make our insides right. To make our insides right with Him, our insides right with others, our insides right on all the things that our insides were made to live on. And when the insides are right, the outside gets better. And if we want to be peacemakers, we better have peace with God and with others on our insides so that we have the building blocks to make it outside of us. This whole inside world thing. Did you know that there are 1.3 billion stars in our galaxy? That's how massive our galaxy is. And that's just one galaxy in the whole universe. 1.3 billion stars. I don't know who counts those. Don't test me on this. I'm not an astrophysicist. That's a shock to you too, isn't it? But did you know that there are 3.2 billion individual pairs of DNA in every single cell in your body? Microbiologists and particle physicists argue that the microscopic world is more vast and more unexplored than even all of outer space. The inner world has more possibilities and more territory still to be explored than the outer world. If you took a picture of a galaxy and the brightest star in that galaxy, and that picture showed all the networks, and you can see the Milky Way would be an example of that. And then you took a picture of one neuron in a brain and all the connections from that neuron lighting up in all the directions it can go. Those two pictures look almost exactly the same. There are 8 trillion connections in your brain. I'm not saying all your connections are working, but there are 8 trillion connections that are possible between neurons in your brain. And there aren't that many of anything out there that we know of that we've been able to map anywhere. The inner world is more vast and the possibilities are greater, and there's more richness in the inner world than there even is in the outer world. That's just true physically. I think what Jesus is telling us here is that there's something to that in the spiritual as well. That if we could somehow spend more time on our inner world, get our inner world right, the outer world would get better too. Then he goes to verse 10. And I told you it gets worse, right? And then he says, "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness." So you're in your ultimate state of well-being when you're persecuted. When somebody mistreats you because of righteousness. And by righteousness, we don't mean because you're a self-righteous jerk. He means the biblical sense of righteousness. That you're right with God and you're right with others. That you're meek, that you're poor in spirit, that you're merciful. And somehow that ticks people off. And you know what? It kind of does sometimes. Try to be meek at a family gathering when everybody wants you to take a side. Try to have enough strength to hold your opinion in reserve and see how happy your whole family gets with you. You'd probably be the only one there that gets everybody mad at you, and all you did was keep your mouth shut. But all these things are the things that we might get persecuted for, being right with God and right with others. And he says you're in a state of ultimate well-being when you're persecuted. There's one of our favorite movies as a family is Princess Bride. We watched it a lot when the girls were small. And Inigo Montoya, one of the great theologians of that movie, says this line at one point. I forget the character he's talking to, but he says, "You keep using that word, but I don't think it means what you think it means." I kind of want to say that to Jesus as we go through the Beatitudes. He keeps using this word, blessed. Blessed are you when, blessed are you when, blessed are you when. He keeps using that word, but I'm not so sure he knows what that word means. Except he's Jesus. So maybe he does. Then he goes on in verse 11, he says, "Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you." Have you been insulted, persecuted, or lied about lately? When that happened, did you have a moment where you said, "Oh, I feel blessed"? It just doesn't add up, does it? But he says, when all this happens, and it happens because of me, because of Jesus. Now make sure you get this right. If people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because it's true, this does not apply to you. So don't go around being a jerk and then saying, "Wow, I'm blessed," because people are mistreating me. Well, they're treating you probably right, just like they should, because you're being a jerk. He says when it happens because of him, because of Jesus, he says, "Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven." Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. So now we're getting to ultimate blessedness here. Now we're getting to paradise, to shalom, to blessedness. "For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." How is it possible when you're being insulted, persecuted, and lied about to feel blessed? To feel like you're in an ultimate state of well-being? Is it like some kind of weird trance that you have to get into? You've got to meditate and just really get in touch with your inner whatever? I think the only way we ever get there is if our inner relationship with Jesus is so rich, so all-consuming, so deep, so life-giving, that we're so confident that nothing that ever happens to us from the outside could ever touch it. That we know we've discovered the real source of all blessedness, of ultimate well-being, and we've invited him into our hearts, into our lives, and we nurture a relationship with him. It becomes utterly unshakable to any force that would ever happen upon us. Wouldn't it be something to get to a place in life where no insult, no persecution, and no lie about me would shake me to my core? Because my core is already occupied by a force much greater than any of that. That's the kind of walk with Jesus that Jesus is offering to us in the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes aren't all of us running around being sweeter of our own free will. The Beatitudes are painting a picture for us of what's possible in our rich, vast inner world when Jesus resides there. And when we experience the ultimate state of blessedness that comes from being in a real relationship with him. Christians, we have an opportunity as things might get worse around us in the days ahead, as things might get better around us in the days ahead. Who knows which way the world's going in the next 6 months? But I ought to be able to know which way my walk with Jesus is going. And I ought to know that the world can count on me to be a source of mercy and peace to the outer world, because I have discovered the ultimate source of these qualities, and he lives within my soul. This is my word to you from the Word of God, and it's my prayer for you as we go forward. If we could be this kind of presence in our communities and this kind of presence to each other, we really would be blessed, wouldn't we? And I believe Jesus doesn't lie. So if he preaches it to us, it's possible. And I'm counting on him to make it a reality in my own life. So the next time I'm in red tide or in no-see-em land, my fragile sense of vacation paradise isn't so easily shattered. So I'm not preaching to you from the top of the mountain as one who has made it, but as somebody walking along with you, recognizing, you know what Jesus says sounds really good, it sounds really true, and I'm going to walk toward it. Will you join me in that journey?